D&D number 9, Circle of Life, in Jesus' name, chapter 31. Taylor called her mom to let her know dinner was over, and she was given 30 more minutes to stay. After dessert and cleanup was finished, Taylor asked Gabe if she could speak to him privately somewhere, and they ended up walking out to the backyard. Holding hands, they walked past the pool and to a retaining wall. Taylor hopped up on the wall, and Gabe stood in front of her, standing between her legs. She put her hands around his neck, and he rested his hands on her waist. "You've been awfully quiet," he said. "Sorry, I'm just thinking a lot today, I guess. Besides, with your family, it's hard to get a word in." "Oh, is there something you wanted to say?" She smiled. "No, I was completely mesmerized by the conversation and by the story of your dad and Jeff. It's amazing, isn't it? I hope one day I'll be able to do things like that. I mean, save people. I have a feeling you're meant for great things, very great things, just like that." "You think?" "I really do." "I'm going to try," Gabe said solemnly. "So has it been a good birthday?" "Yeah, it's been great. Unbelievably great." "I haven't given you my present yet," Taylor said with a smile. "Sure you have. You being here is the best gift of all." "Aw, that's sweet," Taylor said with a giggle. "But it makes you sound like a player." Gabe laughed. Well, I meant it. I wasn't playing." He took her face in his hands and kissed her. When the kiss ended, he wrapped his arms around her and held her softly against his chest. They remained like that a long time. Finally, she looked up. "I have something for you." She raised up and pulled what looked like a coin out of her pocket. "It's not a car or a $2 million piece of property or a gun or even a shirt. But when I saw it at a small shop on the boardwalk at Laguna Beach, I knew it was what I wanted to give you. And I didn't put it in a box or wrap it because you seem like the type that doesn't really care about that stuff." He smiled and stroked his hand down her cheek. She held the gold coin out and placed it in his hand, and he looked closely at the coin, which wasn't a coin at all, but a medallion. It was engraved with the words, "Always remember you were my first true love." On the reverse side was 2 intersecting circles, symbolizing an eternal connection. "Taylor, this is amazing." "Really?" "Yes, it's perfect. It's real gold, I mean gold-plated, not solid gold, so it's not like worthless." "It wouldn't be worthless if it was on tin. The words on it are priceless. I thought you could, keep it with you in your pocket, and you'll always have a reminder of how much I love you, even if you stop loving me." "I don't think that's going to happen." She smiled. "I'm glad you think that." He kissed her again, several more times, and when he pulled away, he was breathing heavy and looking deep into her eyes, and his hands slid from her waist to rest on her thighs, and she took a deep breath and took his hands in hers and hopped down off the wall. "I guess my dad will be here any minute." He smiled. "I guess you're right." They walked toward the back door. "Taylor?" "Yes?" "Thank you." She knew he wasn't just thanking her for the gift, and she smiled. "You're welcome." New scene. It's still June 14th. It's 9 p.m. Friday evening, Tanner home, Pine Forest, Georgia. "Dad?" Gabe said as he poked his head in his office. Keegan held a finger up. "Yes, and call me first thing in the morning with a report on his condition and a report on the status of the case. And get me early because I have a wedding to attend." He hit a button on the Ameritech landline and looked up at Gabe. "What you got?" "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I heard you say his condition. Is someone hurt?" Keegan sighed and nodded. "An agent up in North Carolina helping out a small-town sheriff with a drug bust. He was shot twice, but thank God, looks like he's going to make it. What did you need, son?" "I was wondering if I could go up to Joe's for a little while. The guys are there, and I haven't been able to spend much time with them." Keegan frowned. "It's already 9 o'clock. "I won't stay long. Agent Dalton is off duty." Gabe frowned. "I'd be safe with the guys and Jake's Marine friends. Are any of them carrying?" "I don't know, but I can find out." He pulled out his phone and called young Eric. "Hey, Eric. So I was thinking about coming up there, and my dad wants to know if any of you guys are armed." "Yeah, I have arms," he laughed. Gabe smiled, realizing young Eric was drinking. He put his phone on speaker. "Hey, little bro, you still there?" Yeah, come on up to Joe's. We'll be happy to see you. Right, guys? My dad won't let me unless there's someone else who can protect me. Unless there's someone there who can protect me. Oh, hold on. Hey, Derek! Any of you guys carrying your sidearm? He yelled across the room. There was a rustling and then Derek's voice up close. Eric, my man, you don't go yelling that out in a crowded bar. It's called concealed carry for a reason. Who you talking to? Eric laughed. Oops, my bad. It's the young Gabester. Gabe glanced at his father, who rolled his eyes. Give me the phone. Hey, Gabe, is that you? Yes, this is Derek. Your little movie star friend here is a little bit wasted. I can tell. I wanted to come up there, but I don't have my bodyguard right now, and Dad wants to know if any of you guys are carrying. Yep, me and Shane are. We always are. Tell your dad we got you, buddy. Great, thanks. See you in a few. He ended the call and looked at his father. So? Keegan nodded. Okay. But I'll have to take you up there, and it sounds like you might have to keep an eye on young Eric. He's not legal, and I don't want Joe to get in trouble. I will, but I'm sure Jojo, and Logan are also watching out for him. You don't need to drink. You got that? Oh, yes, sir. I don't really want to anyway. All right, let's do this. He stood and stretched. A few minutes later, they pulled up in front of Joe's. Keegan frowned and shook his head. What's wrong? Gabe asked. He nodded to his right. That's Rose's car. Gabe sighed. I'll keep an eye on her, too. You do that. I'm surprised you didn't know she was here. Don't you have a tracker on her? Yes, but I don't keep track of her every minute. Gabe smiled. That's good to know. I track you every second of every day. Very funny. Thanks for the ride, Dad. No problem. By the way, that reminds me of something I wanted to ask. After July, do you think you and Mom can get me around to where I need to go until I leave? In August? What's wrong with your truck? Nothing. It's great. And well, I was wondering how you would feel about me giving it to Peyton to take with him up to UGA. He's going to need some transportation, and all they have is his mom's little broken-down car. I have no problem with that, but let's see how your 2 fundraisers go. You might not have to do that. Right. You have money in your wallet? A little. Keegan pulled out $40 and held it out. Here, take this and don't say I didn't ever give you anything. I would never say that. He took the money. Thanks, Dad. See you later. Not too late. Yes, sir. Inside Joe's, Gabe was greeted heartily by young Eric, Jojo, and Logan. He was offered drinks by the Marines, which he declined, and challenged to a game of 8-ball by Jojo, which he accepted. And on the way to play, he came to Rose's table, where she sat drinking, with Mike Moreland. She stood quickly when she saw him, nervously rubbing her hands on her jeans. Gabe, what are you doing out so late? I'm just spending some time with the guys. He turned to Mike and offered his hand. It looks like you're doing the same. Look, little bro, Dad doesn't know that we've been dating, so I appreciate you keeping this on the down low. Gabe shook his head. Is that what you think? What are you saying? Does he know? I'm just saying that you know Dad, and if you think he doesn't know stuff, then you're not thinking very clearly, and that sort of bothers me. Rose frowned. Well, by all means, I don't want to bother my little brother. Gabe looked into her eyes. Good. Then fix it, he said fiercely. He turned and walked away. He knew he just pissed her off, and he truly hated it when Rose was mad, but he also hated to see the hurt look in his father's eyes, so he didn't regret a bit what he said. New scene. It is now June 15th, the wee hours of Saturday morning, Pine Forest Country Inn, Pine Forest, Georgia. Jake woke at the sound of a text coming in. He picked up his phone. It was after midnight, his wedding day. Scrubbing a hand over his face, he sat up and read the text. Come outside in the backyard. Heart emoji. He jumped out of bed, went to his window, and peered down. Lena stood there looking up at him, and he held a finger up. On my way, he texted. Quickly pulling on some jeans and shoes, he quietly made his way downstairs and out the back door. Lena ran to him, and he hugged her and held her close for a few minutes. Finally, he pulled her away so he could see her face. She wasn't smiling. What's going on, Bugs? She shrugged. I couldn't sleep. I'm too nervous. He nodded. Nervous or excited? I guess both. What you nervous about? Everything. He thought a minute. Oh, we've got everything all set up and ready. Are you talking about stuff like the florist forgetting your bouquet or the bakery dropping the cake or something else? Something else? What? Saying your vows? No, I know exactly what I'm going to say. He sighed. Okay. So are you thinking of leaving me at the altar, like doing the runaway bride thing? I don't think I'd do that to you. You don't think? I wouldn't. He blew out a breath. You had me worried there for a minute. Jake, are you sure you love me? He took her face in his strong hands. I do love you, Melina Stewart. I am absolutely, positively, madly in love with you, and it kind of hurts that you question that. Well, I don't mean to question you. It's just that I've loved you for so long, almost all my life. And now it seems like all my dreams are actually happening. It's like it's too good to be true. And you know what they say, when something seems too good to be true, that's because it is. He moved his thumbs over her beautiful face, bent down and kissed her softly. Bugs, are you willing to give me the benefit of the doubt and put me to the test? I promise you that I'll prove to you that us getting married is exactly what God has planned for us. She sighed and leaned her head against his bare chest, ran her hand over the muscle and sinew, and then lower, her fingertips traced the outlines of his rippling abs. He drew in a sharp breath. Tucking her fingers into the waistband of his jeans, she stopped when she touched the hardness of the gun tucked inside. She pulled away and looked him over and smiled up at him. You are totally hot. He chuckled. You are too. That Bugs Bunny t-shirt, it's making me crazy. She giggled. Let's just go to number 8 right now. We can snuggle together all night. Wouldn't that be nice? Sighing, he nodded his head. Yes, that would be nice, but it's too tempting. Tomorrow night, well, actually tonight, since it's after midnight, we will be together, and it will be right and good and perfect. Okay? Yes, it will be perfect. Come on now, Bugs. I'll walk you home. No, I'll walk you back to your father's house, because after tomorrow, your home is with me. She smiled. That's very macho sounding. He laughed. Well, I am a Marine. New scene, June 15th, Saturday morning, Stewart Ranch, Pine Forest, Georgia. Lena couldn't help but smile at all of her bridesmaids. As all of her bridesmaids chattered away, everyone was in her parents' bedroom because it was large and had a huge bathroom. They were doing their hair and putting on makeup. There hadn't been time to order bridesmaid dresses, so each one had chosen their own dress. As long as it was any shade of yellow, it was good, and the result was absolutely fabulous. The energy in the room was light and happy and exciting, and Lena was grateful for that. The conversations centered around how beautiful Lena looked, how amazing the barn looked, how gorgeous the flowers were, how awesome the cake turned out, how cute JoJo and Logan Adams were, how hot was young Eric Keno, how handsome the Marines looked in their dress blues and whites, and how Gabe looked every bit as handsome in his plain blue suit. And then they bragged over which hot guy was going to walk them each out at the end of the ceremony. They discussed why Lena and Jake had decided to not have a wedding rehearsal and laughed over the answer. Lena said, because I've always thought that was silly. All of my friends and family are smart enough to understand simple directions. When the music starts, you walk slowly up the aisle in the order I told you. Once you get to the front, men go to the right, ladies to the left, stand in a neat little row, listen to the pastor, watch us say I do, leave the same way you entered, head out to the front of the barn, and get ready to party. Anyone who doesn't understand, let me know right now and I'll go over it with you. They looked around to see if anyone would dare say she didn't understand. Rose grinned. And that is why Bugs and I are such good friends. The next discussion had to do with where to place the flowers in Lena's hair, which was swept up on the sides, away from her adorable pixie face. The 8 bridesmaids included the 2 sets of Tanner twins, Lena's 2 high school best friends, and Lena's 2 15-year-old cousins. Each of them were taking a turn to place a few of the white flowers in her hair and hugging her and telling her how beautiful she is or how lucky she is to have a fine man like Jake. They told her not to worry. He would always come home to her, and they'd be there for her when he was deployed. They'd had to repair her makeup after that part, and now each girl was just finishing any touch-ups needed on Lena and on themselves when there was a knock on the door. Rose peeked out and then opened the door to allow Lena's mom and sister into the room. Everyone cooed at Erilyn in her frothy yellow flower girl dress. She had a white basket filled with yellow rose petals. Lisa was wearing a simple cream-colored sleeveless dress that was high-waisted and then spread out in a feminine bell to her knees. A thin yellow belt accentuated her still narrow upper waist, and fullness of the skirt hid the small baby bump already showing. "Mom," Lena said softly, "you are stunning." Lisa waved her hand. "You are the stunning one today, my Lena Bug." "And Erilyn, oh my goodness," Lena continued. "Sweetie, you look like a princess." She hugged her and Erilyn pushed her away. "Don't squish my roses," she complained, making everyone laugh. "Well, Lena," Rose said, "I'm going to go find my escort and give you some private time with your mom. Next time I see you, you'll be walking down the aisle." She kissed her cheek. The rest of the bridesmaids did the same, and Kylie asked Erilyn if she wanted to go look at the cake. Finally, Lena and Lisa were alone, and Lisa smiled at her daughter. "How you feeling, sweetie?" "Good, excited, a little nervous." "Well, that's to be expected. I wanted to say something to you, but I'm not quite sure how to say it. I didn't have my mother around on my wedding day. She wasn't interested in my happiness." "That is so sad, Mom. I've been so blessed to have you as my mother. I can't imagine not having my mother in my life." "It's me who's been blessed. You've been an extreme source of joy for your father and I from the moment we discovered I was pregnant. You are such a strong young lady, and you've always seemed to know what you want, and I know you've wanted Jake for a very long time. Baby girl, I couldn't be happier for you. Jake is a fine young man. He loves God. He's not ashamed to confess that love. He's honorable in every way, and I can see how much he loves you. I feel so blessed to know that the man who is your husband will never hurt you and will always protect you. I'm blessed because I won't have to worry about that. If I were to give you any words of wisdom, it would be this. It's not shameful to have a man protect you, and it's not shameful to take good care of that man. Jake is a man that you can respect and admire, and if that ever starts to change, you need to confide in him because communication is the key to all relationships, and you live in a way that he will always be able to respect and admire you. Work at these things. They're not easy. God never said life should be easy, but it will be wonderful and joyful as long as you stay close to the Lord and keep his commandments." She sighed and smiled. "Like I said, I never had this talk with my mom. How'd I do?" "Oh, Mama, you did awesome. I love you so much. I'm going to miss you. I'm always here. I'll always be here for you. Just a short walk or phone call away, always." She took a tissue and dabbed at Lena's makeup and picked up some mascara and fixed it. "There." She checked the time. "It's almost noon. Are you ready to head out?" "Let's do this," Lena said. New scene. Jake eyed his father as he came in the room. He hadn't seen him in his uniform since the funeral of a friend they'd attended back when Jake was just 10 years old. His father was well-muscled and trim. He was 50 years old, but looked 30-something, probably because he stayed in top shape as the master of his own line of martial arts schools. He had blonde hair, so the little bit of gray at the temples was unnoticeable. He glanced at his father's many ribbons and medals, including a Purple Heart and Medal of Honor. "Looking sharp there, Dad," Jake said. "Thanks, son. You will too if you ever finish getting dressed." Jake laughed. "I'm working on it. It seems my hands are shaking," he said as he picked up the white belt and dropped it. John retrieved the belt and put it around his son's waist. "You nervous?" "Well, I didn't think I would be, but suddenly I am. I don't know why." "Well, you're officially in front of friends, family, and God, taking on the responsibility of the well-being, protection, and happiness of another living human being. That'll make a man's hands shake a bit." Jake chuckled. "Then, I guess I'm normal." "There's nothing normal about Jacob Apple. You've been an extraordinary person from the moment you were born. I know I've said it before, but Jake, I am so proud of you, son. You've achieved so much, including the youngest raider on record. What an accomplishment. John reached up and lightly touched the golden eagle on his son's chest. He had to clear his throat from the emotion that welled up. I love you, Dad. You taught me everything I know. You taught me how to be a man, and I will count myself successful if I can be half the man you are. They hugged for some time until John was able to control his emotions. He patted Jake's back and backed away. Lena is a wonderful girl. You make sure you take care of her as a man of God should. You be kind. Don't stifle her. Listen when she speaks. You're strong, but so is she. Allow her to be so. Yet ultimately, it's your job to protect her and keep her safe. But make decisions about the home and family a joint thing. Honor her. Respect her. Jake smiled. Everything you just said, I can see that you do exactly that with Mom. You're so good to her. It's a great example for me. I'm good to her, yes, but she makes it easy. She's so loving and kind to everyone. She lives her faith. How can I not honor that in her? How's she doing? Is she struggling with all this? Not at all. She's truly happy for you both, and I think she's looking forward to a little one. That will probably be down the road, Jake warned. Well, I'm not going to tell her that. I don't have the heart. Jake strapped on his baldric and sword. He donned his white gloves. He stood at attention. Inspection, sir? John nodded, walked around his son, came back to face him, and nodded again. I see one fine-looking Marine. Jake smiled. Let's do this. New scene. Keegan shook hands with the surprised guests. He was so excited to see and hear the results of what they'd planned. It had actually been Ricky's idea, and he was the one who'd gotten the ball rolling. He said it was a shame that Jake and Lena needed music to walk down the aisle, and they intended to play bits and pieces of recordings of the chosen songs over the sound system when they had access to a few of the hottest Grammy-winning recording stars there were, right in their circle of friends. And so these pros had taken time to cover all the songs Jake and Lena had chosen and were going to perform them live as each group walked down the aisle. Keegan was also excited that his own Lizzie had been invited to join them and that she'd actually accepted. She'd said, everyone says I have a gift, and God says we should use our gifts in service to others, so how could I not accept? Ricky approached with a giant smile. Toby, it's so good to see you, man. They shook hands. He kissed Caroline's cheek and then took Grace's hands. Good grief. Aren't you supposed to be this high? He asked, putting his hand waist high. Grace giggled. Mr. Keno, I'm 25, and you know it. I do, and you have grown into such a beautiful young lady. He looked at Toby. I bet you're having to beat the guys off with a stick. Toby grinned. I don't need no stick. Ricky laughed and turned to Brody. And you, young man, I hear you're making quite a name for yourself up at Tennessee. I'm working on it, sir. What's your current batting average? .411, which is number 5 in the nation right now. That's a great job, Brody, Keegan said. Gabe's best friend, Peyton Murphy, he's headed to UGA on a baseball scholarship. Get Gabe to introduce you. Maybe you wouldn't mind giving him some pointers. He's a good kid with no father to help. I'd be happy to do that, sir. And I hear you're singing today, too. He shrugged. Yeah, they talked me into it. I mean, we sing all the time as a family, and they say they needed my tenor voice. Well, I can't wait to hear you guys. Okay, well, I'm guessing you guys want to do a sound check. I'll leave you to it. He glanced at his watch. You have an hour. Will that be enough time? Toby grinned. We got this. You go do what you need to do. Keegan's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the name and put the phone to his ear. Gabe? What's taking you so long? He stood silent for a minute. What the hell? Do I need to come there? His words got Ricky's attention, and he waited until Keegan hung up. You need help with something? Gabe went to pick up his friend for the wedding and had to rescue him from some guys who jumped him. Ricky nodded. In other words, he had to fight. Is he hurt? No, Gabe had Agent Dalton with him. Peyton is a little beat up, which happened before Gabe drove up. Gabe is fine except he tore his shirt, but says his suit jacket will cover it. And Peyton's girlfriend is going to need some first aid on her scraped-up knees when they get here. He shook his head. This is a small country town, Ricky said. It doesn't seem like this kind of stuff should happen here. Keegan sighed. Well, I've learned that evil is everywhere. It permeates everything. Ricky smiled. Yep, and that is exactly why God has called us to fight that darkness. Keegan nodded, offering a small smile. You're right. 15 minutes later, Gabe arrived with Peyton and Avery. The women took over, taking them both into the Stewart's home to doctor them and clean them up, and Gabe was instructed by Taylor to go wash the dirt off his face and fix his hair. New scene. Soft live music started to play. All the people who'd been milling around, taking pics with celebrities or chatting excitedly, looked around to see who was playing the music, and it caused a bit of a stir. The keyboard was being played by someone they didn't know, but drums were being played softly by a man they did recognize, Jeff Jackson, one of the original members of Toby's first band. The two men on guitar everyone knew immediately, the hunky country star Toby Nash and his equally hunky son Brody Smith. Standing next to him was his beautiful sister Grace Nash, who'd taken on her father's stage name as her own. The wedding guests began taking their seats. When it seemed most everyone was in place, the music changed to What a Wonderful World, and John Apple walked Miss Mattie in and set her down on the far end of the front left row. She patted his hand, and he smiled and kissed her cheek. He then turned and went back up the aisle. With Wonderful World still playing and being sung, Joe and Shirley Carter, Lena's grandparents on her mother's side, walked down the aisle, and right behind them, Lena's grandparents on her father's side, Charles and Patricia Stewart. They all sat in the row just behind Mattie. The music changed to Elvis's Can't Help Falling in Love, and slowly John and Jody Apple walked down the aisle. There were a few ahs murmured. Lizzie and Grace took part of the lead on this song, and it was so beautiful. John looked handsome in his marine dress, the blue jacket and the white pants, his ceremonial sword at his side, and his chest decorated with ribbons and medals. It was breathtaking. His wife of 23 years, Jody, looked like a teenager. She wore a pale yellow, lacy shift dress with matching shoes and a beautiful corsage that Jake had personally pinned on her dress with much love and honor. Her long, straight black hair shone like silk, and her smile was radiant. Chaz straightened his eldest son's suit jacket and tie. It was almost time for Charlie to walk his mother down the aisle. Go slow, he reminded him. He turned and looked at his wife. Lisa, my love, you are radiant, and that corsage, though pretty, pales in comparison. Lisa laughed. How you feeling, Red? I'm doing okay, my handsome marine cowboy, she replied, reaching out to touch the ribbons on his chest and then the sword at his side. He kissed her softly and looked at his son. Shoulders back, head up, make me proud. Charlie nodded. Yes, sir. He held his arm out to his mother. The music changed to Isn't She Lovely? And Charlie started down the aisle with the mother of the bride. Toby's mellow voice, harmonizing with his son's voice, sent chills through all the ladies. Everyone smiled as the beautiful redhead walked with her eldest son. Joe Carter smiled at his daughter. He was so happy and grateful to be sharing this moment. He'd searched for his daughter for 25 years before she turned up here in Pine Forest. Today, he was a happy man. The music changed again, this time to Onward Christian Soldiers, causing a smattering of laughter as Pastor Tim, who would be officiating, and Grandmaster Keno, who'd been asked to give an opening prayer, walked single file down the aisle. Jake watched and smiled. He couldn't believe that the Toby Nash and family were singing at his wedding. He looked around wondering if people were taking video, and sure enough, several people were, including the official videographer and also Taylor, who'd been asked to take video and pics for Gabe's new website. New music for the groom started. Jason Mraz's I'm Yours. Jake gave it a few bars before he started, like he'd been instructed by Lena. He got to the front and stood to the right of Pastor Tim. He stood at ease. Jody smiled up at her handsome son. He smiled back at her. In his uniform, he was a sight to behold. When the music changed again, the whole crowd burst into laughter as the recognizable first beats of Bringing Sexy Back began. The 8 groomsmen started down the aisle one at a time. Since there were 4 civilians and 4 Marines, they'd been arranged to have a civilian in between each Marine. The civilians wore dark blue suits and white shirts and blue ties and black shoes to complement the Marine dress. Despite their marching music, the groomsmen walked with decorum down the aisle. Marine Shane, then JoJo, Marine Derek, then young Eric, Marine Drew, then Logan, Marine Corey, and finally Gabe. They all stood in the at-ease position, and one could almost hear the sighs from the girls in the audience as they looked over the 8 male specimens. Chaz lifted his daughter's chin as they stood behind the bridesmaids. You know I love you, baby girl, right? Yes, Daddy, I've always known, and I'm grateful for that. You can always come to me. Do you know that? She smiled. I do. But now you'll have another man in your life who loves you as much as I do. Trust him, sweetie. Do you trust him, Daddy? I wouldn't be walking you down the aisle if I didn't. I love him so much. I know, darling. I'm so happy for you. He bent down and kissed her cheek, and Erilyn tugged on Lena's dress. Is it almost my turn? Lena knelt next to her sister. You know what we talked about. Right after Rose walks down the aisle, then Matt will go, and right after that, it's your turn. Remember, when you get to the front, go sit with Mom. Your music is Thank Heaven for Little Girls. It's almost time, and I'll tell you when to go. Rose turned to Lena and made sure she was ready. She checked her hair. It was perfect. She straightened the shoulder straps of the white lacy dress. Her eyes traveled down the length of the dress. It had a flounce at the bottom and rose slightly in the front, just enough to show off her white cowboy boots. In the back, it touched the floor. The upper dress hugged her lovely body and then flared out in a froth of petticoats and lace. Okay, Bugs, you're absolutely perfect, Rose said. She held up her right casted hand. Except this. Rose shrugged. Well, it just shows me how strong you are. She smiled and kissed her cheek. That's me. Gotta go. Lena smiled as the bridesmaids' music began. It was such a surprise to have 2 Grammy winners singing at her wedding. She wondered who was responsible for the surprise. This time, Aunt Lizzie and Grace Nash belted out This One's for the Girls by Martina McBride. Gabe looked over at his mother as she sang. The group was situated on the left side of the barn, just beyond the first row where the apples were sitting. It was obvious the Nashes were real pros. It was obvious the Nashes were real pros. They knew just how and when to end each song. They'd obviously cut each one to fit the timing, and so far it was perfect. The music changed again, and everyone laughed as Lena's youngest brother, the ring bearer, 12-year-old Matt, quickly danced up the aisle to the chorus of Boss of Me. He handed a ring to Shane and then the other one to Rose. Just a few seconds later, 7-year-old Erilyn, with the same bright red hair as Lena, started up the aisle, tiptoeing slowly to her music. She was doing a great job, making sure there were rose petals on every part of the aisle. Everyone was smiling and then laughing when she got to the front and still had some rose petals left and turned her little basket upside down and shook it to make sure she'd used them all. Finally, the first fanfare chords of Wagner's Here Comes the Bride sounded, and given that they'd already heard, everyone was a little surprised by the traditional music. And given what they'd already heard, everyone was a little surprised by the traditional music. But then the music changed again, and Hometown Girl by Josh Turner started. Everyone laughed because the words were just so accurate when it came to Lena. Toby even changed the name of the team mascot in the song from Panther to Rebel. Lena and her father started down the aisle. She looked straight ahead, searching, and her eyes met Jake's. Lord have mercy, she loved him. Just looking into his eyes gave her so much joy, so much comfort. He smiled at her, and her chin trembled like she might start bawling, and she paused a moment to get herself under control. Because she stopped, Jake raised his eyebrows and nodded at her. Don't you do it, he thought. Don't you chicken out. He blew out a breath that he'd been holding when she started walking again. He felt Shane, who was standing next to him, reach up and pat him on the back, and he glanced at him and nodded. Jake looked her over. Her tumble of red hair had flowers in it. Her dress was sweet and innocent, which made it sexier than if it had revealed a lot of skin. As she got closer, he swallowed hard. How could he come to love someone so much so quickly? Her father brought her to his side, kissed her cheek, touched her face, smiled at her, shook Jake's hand, and went to sit next to his wife. Pastor Tim immediately called on Grandmaster Keno to pray. It was a beautiful, heartfelt prayer, and as always, when that man prayed, people were moved and tears welled. Eric squeezed both Jake's and Lena's hands and went to sit next to Shelley. Pastor Tim quickly moved through his part. We are gathered here today in the sight of God and these witnesses to join together Jacob John Apple and Melena Lee Stewart in holy matrimony, which is an honorable estate instituted of God. Therefore, it is not to be entered into unadvisedly or lightly, but reverently and soberly. Into this holy estate these two young people come now to be joined. Therefore, if anyone can show just cause why they may not be lawfully joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. A few seconds later, he went on. Jake and Lena have decided to say their own vows, and so at this time I turn it over to Jacob. Jake began with a strong voice, the voice of a man in love. He promised to love her, to cherish her, to protect her, to provide for her, to listen to her, and to always be faithful to her, to support her in anything she wants to do, to love God and worship together with her, and to always work toward bettering himself so that he may keep himself worthy of her love. His last words were beautiful. Lena, I know that a lot of people in this world say these vows to each other when they get married. And then when circumstances change, they completely forget all about them. But I swear to you, Bugs, in front of God and all these people, I will never forget my vows. We're in this for better or for worse, no matter what we face. And I will never, never break these vows. I will never leave you. I will never be unfaithful to you. I will always have your best interest in my heart. Lena couldn't stop the tears from welling, so when she blinked, 2 large tears ran down her cheeks. She didn't even bother to wipe them away. Pastor Tim called on her, and she drew a deep breath and began. When Jake and I wrote our vows, we did it separately, so he didn't know what I was going to say, she said, addressing everyone there. And yet, if I were to show you my paper where I wrote them down, you would see that I wrote almost exactly the same things that Jake just said. She stopped and looked up into Jake's warm eyes. That tells me, Jake, that God really did send us to be with each other. We were meant to be. And I vow to you, I will love you, I will take care of you, I will support you in all things. You can depend on me to keep the home fires burning while you're away, and to be here for you when you return. I will never be unfaithful to you. I will thank God for you every day. I will plead the blood of Jesus over you every day before I leave our bedroom, and I will do it again before I go to sleep each night. I will work hard and never be slothful. I will strive to make myself a better person every day so that you have no reason to be disappointed in me. I will vow to worship God with you. And I swear, Jacob Apple, I swear, I will never break these vows. The power in the room was palpable. People were moved to tears by such love and devotion. Pastor Tim had to collect himself, and he directed the couple to exchange rings. Jake quickly removed his white gloves and handed them to Shane, who then handed Jake the ring he'd place on Lena's finger. With this ring, I pledge myself to you, Jake said, and then pushed the ring onto her finger. It hugged the engagement ring perfectly because it was a set. And Rose handed Lena Jake's ring and took the bouquet from her. And with this ring, I pledge myself to you, Lena said. She gently slid the simple gold band onto his finger. Pastor Tim prayed. May God and his Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, always be at the center of the new lives you are now starting to build together, that you may know the ways of true love and kindness. May the Lord bless you both all the days of your lives and fill you with his joy. In Jesus' name, amen. The congregation murmured an amen. Those whom God has joined together, let no man put asunder. By the power invested in me by the good state of Georgia, and more importantly by God, I now pronounce that you are husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Jake smiled at Lena and moved close to her, took her face in his hands as he had hundreds of times now, and lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was slow and soft and gentle, and had all the female onlookers sighing. The kiss ended, and they turned toward the large congregation of about 300 people. Everyone stood and cheered. The 4 Marine groomsmen moved in step to stand beside the aisle, 2 on one side, 2 on the other. Then, much to everyone's surprise, John Apple and Chaz Stewart joined them on either side. The crowd loved watching the Arch of Sabers ceremony. The music began, and Jake and Lena made their way under the arch, and then the swords were sheathed, and one by one the Marines went to the bridesmaids they were assigned and escorted them out. John and Chaz escorted their wives out. The wedding party formed a reception line, and people came and congratulated the new married couple. While inside, the guys all turned around and started clearing the white folding chairs from the room. All the grandparents were escorted to a large table just for them. With so many hands to help, the chairs were up and gone in 15 minutes. Caterers immediately started laying goodies on the giant buffet tables lining each side of the barn, and all clear was given to the wedding party, and Lena whistled to get everyone's attention. "Let's party!" she yelled. The DJ came in and took over. Jake and Lena quickly made their way over to Toby and his family to thank him. "That was amazing," Lena gushed. "I can't thank you enough. Oh my goodness, I was so surprised." Toby smiled. "It was fun, and you can thank Ricky for the idea." "Oh, I will, but let me just hug you." She threw her arms around his neck. Her Aunt Cindy took pictures, and next she went to Grace and shrieked about how awesome she is. Jake shook Toby's hand and then Brody's. "Hey, guy. So how's it going? I hear you're doing great things." Brody smiled. "Nah, I'm just hitting the ball with a stick. You're the one doing great things." "Well, we each serve in our own ways. You have the opportunity to influence young kids in so many positive ways. You won't believe the things you can do." Brody nodded. "Thanks for that. I'll strive to do just that. So, congratulations, man." He looked at Lena as she was chattering with his sister and his mom. "That is one gorgeous girl you got there." "Thanks." "Funny, I always thought she and JoJo were going to get together." "Yeah, thank goodness that didn't work out." "How's Joe feel about it?" "He's okay. He says that was years ago and wishes us well." "Do you believe him?" "Of course. He's a member of the most honorable family I know." Brody nodded. "I agree." A bunch of people came over to congratulate Jake and Lena, ending the conversation. As soon as they accepted those congratulations, Lena spoke to Jake. "Let's go over and serve the grandparents." Jake smiled. "I already love you more than I did a few minutes ago." They went to the Grand's table and hugged them all and asked what they'd like to eat, and they served all 9 of them, except Joe and Shirley, who insisted that they would serve themselves. Lena kissed all their cheeks. Jake hugged all the women and shook hands with all the men. "And now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'm being called to the floor to dance with my wife." Jake escorted Lena to the floor. They waited for the music and were again surprised when Toby, with his guitar, and Aunt Lizzie came to the mic, and they sang the most beautiful rendition of Unchained Melody they'd ever heard. Jake pulled Lena close, and it felt so good because it was legal now. It was perfect and right and good, and it felt so right to know that they'd made it to this point without breaking the laws of God. It felt so good and more memorable, and it made the moment so much better. It made it exquisite. He would never forget this moment of pulling his love close to him. Yeah, Jake thought, God knows what he's doing. He nuzzled Lena's cheek and whispered in her ear, "How you doing, Bugs?" "I am in heaven, and I can stay like this all night." "Well, it won't be like this, but it will be all night," he promised, making Lena giggle. Chaz and Lisa watched the dance. Lisa with tears in her eyes, Chaz with resolution. John and Jody did the same. Gabe and Taylor stood side by side watching too, and Gabe snaked his arm around her waist and pulled her close. "Have I told you how beautiful you look today?" "No," she whispered. He smiled. "Well, come outside with me and I'll tell you." She turned to him. "Oh, you don't know how much I'd like to do that, but I can't. I have to video for Isla and for your website." Gabe frowned. "Okay. Well, when are we supposed to do our special dance for them?" I'm not sure. I think right after or right before they throw the bouquet. Okay, well, do they invite other people to dance? When they invite other people to dance, I'm just letting you know that you and me are going to dance, video or not. I need you close to me. And that is the end of chapter 31.